and take a look, a little bit of a deep dive into Yang Hansen. He's kind of caught social media on fire. Lots of media members are giving him a ton of praise and lots of hype. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's real, what's overblown, and tease a little bit of what's to come from Young as he gets ready for his actual regular season debut. We're now a little less than a week away from that. So lots to talk about, lots to catch up on, but let's start with since we last spoke, a few Blazers headlines. So Young had he had his best preseason game against the Kings, and specifically an electric third quarter that caught Twitter on fire, had a lot of typically cynical or at least critical media members kind of bending over backwards and doing backflips and, heaping praise from the mountaintops for Young, which is kind of baffling. Not that he doesn't deserve praise, but just that there's so many people coming out of the woodworks to praise him. So there was a few big wow moments. In particular, he had a really nice pump fake, a kind of a behind the back dribble to shake Drew Eubanks, and then have a nice little spin into the glass. That sent the crowd into a tizzy. So there was stuff like that. Billups had kind of said he'd seen some of those wow moments in camp, and noted that a player his size isn't supposed to be able to do some of those things. Caleb Love called him a star in the making, which Caleb can say. Sure, Caleb also hasn't been in the league yet, so we'll allow it, but maybe not the biggest ringing endorsement from anybody out there yet. But yeah, I mean, even Young has said he's had some nerves, which means he's human. That's great. We want Young to have nerves because he's been called Chinese Jokic for about 6 months, maybe a little less than 6 months. And again, we're gonna do a little bit more of a deep dive, so I don't want to give too much away now. But that preseason game against the Kings really had people going. So that was a big headline, So now I just want to transition quickly into just the Young, going more in depth on the Young experience, and maybe just kind of quickly tying a timeline into how NBA fans have become aware of Young, because he wasn't really on anyone's radar, and then he popped up at the draft combine. And for those unaware and uninitiated, the draft combine typically is players just desperate to make a roster, really, really trying to get any sort of draft stock, build awareness, make a summer league roster, if nothing else, and just kind of get their name out there. So you typically don't see the highest level prospects at the combine. So probably within a day or so of him being there and playing in these not open runs, but playing in 5-on-5 settings, he drew social media tweets from a variety of established accounts saying, "Oh my God, Chinese Jokic is here." And that's insane, right? Like no one should be compared to Jokic, and no one is Jokic. No one is any other version of Jokic besides Jokic. But here was this tweet, and all of a sudden there was this kind of the storm of like, this guy's going to be so good, and can you believe this? And it wasn't really from established media presences, but it was from accounts that typically trade in hyperbole and hype. And so the irony struck not even a few weeks later when the Athletic's John Hollinger wrote his piece on what he saw at the same combine, and he compared then a relatively unknown Young Hansen to a pretty unsung player in the early 2000s who most fans wouldn't even remember, and I only remember because I was a kid growing up playing NBA Live games and being like, who? I don't even know if I can pronounce his name correctly, but I think it was Wang ZZ, something along those lines. And so Hollinger said like he's probably just another guy like this, which somewhat of an apt comparison to say a Chinese player is like another Chinese player. And for him, who's a very established presence and often highly regarded for his analysis and his commentary for The Athletic, he kind of dampened the spirit a little bit of the Young Hansen experience. And then, of course, we all know what happened at the NBA draft. The Blazers traded up, got him, and the hype started again. And excuse me, now we're at this situation now where everything he does is praised. Uh, People are bending over again. I said earlier, but they're bending over backward to like reap the rewards of praising a very, very popular athlete. And I think this is where it gets pretty interesting with Young. There hasn't really been an archetype for this kind of popularity before him. Guys that get drafted coming out of college in the United States or out of high school in the United States often have social media followings, but they're appealing to an American audience. They're appealing to a very established media group. Yang kind of came in, and these social media accounts latched onto him immediately. And maybe it's also this gigantic Chinese market that everyone keeps talking about. The Blazers are trying to tap into this Chinese market, and here he is, Yang. Everyone's doing it, but all these posts, all these highlights, and there's not so many highlights, but there's enough highlights. They're going viral. People can just say things like, "Whoa, Young Hansen's so fun," and it'll get tens of thousands of engagements, which I haven't really seen in my time following the Blazers and covering the Blazers. I've seen popular players, sure, and we've seen the drawbacks of that popularity, but so far, Young is not really like um, leveraging his popularity to do or say anything besides just be kind of a funny personality, which I think is super interesting. But I also think with so much of this hype, it's almost a little unfair for the media to put this much pressure on the kid. I mean, he's been compared to Jokic the second he stepped forth on American soil, right? Do you know who Jokic was compared to when he stepped foot on American soil and started to build his draft stock? Nobody. Like, no one really knew much about Nikola Jokic, and I can say that confidently because I was one of the first few journalists in the United States to interview him. I got to cover him at the Nike Hoop Summit, and I was probably one of, I don't know, we'll say 20 people that interviewed this young, skinny, kind of gangly, goofy looking Serbian kid who played for a Serbian professional team that no one had heard of and who hadn't really done too much at the Nike Hoop Summit. I mean, so many other names had stood out and made him look like, he was kind of overmatched and wasn't really that exciting. So the current archetype for the best player in the world is Nikola Jokic. And when he entered the league, and he came to America, there wasn't really any kind of expectation. Fast forward however many years later, and now we have Young Hansen, who's just constantly being called Jokic, and everyone's so excited for him. I just think that's a ridiculous amount of pressure. And so far, he's handled it really well, to his credit. I just think us in the media maybe can do him a solid by tamping down the hype, closing the fire hose, not always blowing everything up. I think everyone in the media is thinking the same thing. Well, if I'm the one that reaches that Chinese market out, my content is going to be the most read. And I just hope everyone can be a little bit better and a little bit more buttoned up with throwing the praise out there when Young deserves it, but also being brave enough to criticize. And there hasn't been a ton of Young criticism out there. Not that he deserves a whole lot, but there's been several moments in games where he's been overmatched. He's not just dominating every single possession. He's had moments where you go, yeah, he's not ready. He's not ready for this, for a starter's role. He's not ready for a ton of responsibility. You could see it. There's a particular turnover against the Warriors where Jimmy kind of sagged off a little bit and lulled Young into throwing not a lazy pass, but just a pass that didn't have as much urgency as it needed. And Jimmy, who's made a career out of doing this, picked it off, and that's a turnover. There was a moment against the Kings where Sabonis just quickly buried him on the block and one shoulder and one up fake, and Young was out of position badly, and he couldn't keep up. So there's these established superstars in the NBA that he hasn't seen the likes of yet that will get him. Like they'll take advantage of him and they'll beat him right now. He's just not at that level yet, but he does show those flashes of what he can do against even these good players, but particularly against second units. And I think that's where his real value this season will lie, is he might be an absolute second unit demon. He might be able to run an entire offense through himself and create a ton of opportunities against the lesser elite players of the NBA. And some of the things that he does so well, he'll be able to do against these players. I think what's been impressive about him is obviously his footwork's really good. His finishing is deft, but he really knows how to control his space, which I don't think is always true of a big man. Typically, when you see a big man, it's almost like a hot potato game. Like, I gotta get rid of this basketball as quickly as possible. I'm being pressured. I'm going to turn it over. I can't make this pass. Anytime you see a defender, unless it's the absolute best, when you see a defender start to crowd Young, he immediately creates extra space by either dropping a shoulder into the player, pivoting into them to create space, or making his first move, whether it's dribble, go by them, or spin off them. He starts to create space immediately. So you can't really rush him on his passes, which I think is really high level. It's fundamental for a lot of basketball players, but a lot of bigs just don't do it because they're not required to. They're typically quick facilitators when they're in the offense and they're catching the ball on the perimeter at the high elbow, and they move it with a quick snap pass. They're not going to actually read a defense. Young so far has made lots of reads. He expects players to keep moving. He looks for them to move. He looks for them to backdoor, and he obviously is skilled enough where he can make those passes. And that is Jokic-like. It's not, doesn't guarantee he'll be the next Jokic. It doesn't mean he's going to suddenly develop this incredible scoring touch around the rim that just beats everybody. But so far, it's been pretty good. So far, his sneaky strength. He doesn't look like he's the strongest guy in the world, but again, he'll drop that shoulder and he'll create that space. And he's not really getting bullied anywhere. You don't see him get pushed down too much. Like, he's been buried in a few plays, and I mentioned the Sabonis play before. But there'll be some other times where people just beat him. But rather than taking like a dumb foul, like a Karl Anthony Towns flailing foul in the playoffs in the most pivotal moment of the game, he typically just takes the loss. Like, he's smart enough that he knows that you don't need to look a certain type of way. Just take the loss and move on to the next play. So that's a tribute to his IQ, and it's a tribute to just knowing there's more plays in a game, not making a bad situation even worse by fouling. So I've been pretty impressed with his ability to stay out of foul trouble and find his opportunities on offense. He's not forcing anything on offense, which I think is super encouraging. Something you see with a lot of young guards in the NBA, especially, is the speed really affects them and the ability to make a high level decision when there's an elite defender standing in front of them, or just at least someone with elite athleticism hampering them in some way. Young hasn't really had that yet. You know, he will have it for sure. And if he starts games, I don't think he'll start early in the season, but there might be a spot start here and there early, especially if Donovan gets hurt or some matchup requires it. I think we'll see some of those struggles against really good big teams too. Like, I don't think you'd want to see right now, as is currently assembled, you'd want to see Young covering Jokic. I think that would be a bloodbath. Obviously, maybe he'd rise to the occasion and shock the world, but I wouldn't bet on it yet. But that's what's so intriguing about Young, and that's what makes him so much fun, is potentially in 2 to 3 years, he might be that guy. He might be as good as Jokic. He might be a centerpiece for a team. But the hype right now is reaching Jokic-like anticipation, where we should probably be just a little more relaxed. Let's play it cool. Come on, media members. Like, let's we've seen talent before. Let's keep it cool. Let's back off a little bit. Give the kid a chance to grow up. This is a kid right now, and we're putting all this pressure on him to be amazing, and everything he does is going viral. And that's awesome. That's exciting. But let's remember that he's still going to make a lot of mistakes. He has to make mistakes. He literally has to make mistakes to get better and to improve and to become the player that everybody wants him to be.